What's going on, everyone? My name's Tenebris Infinite, and welcome back to Nightingale, where I'm bringing you another endgame build. This time, a mixed build, a real jack of all trades. As a master of both melee and magic, this build balances heavy-hitting melee damage with magic that allows for the option to change your combat style on the fly, fluidly switching between ranged and buffed magic attacks, and hitting enemies for vicious amounts of damage in close quarters. I even worked in a setup that gives you respectable amounts of movement speed, allowing this build to be a build that you can use in your day-to-day gameplay here in Nightingale. I took on a bit of a challenge with this one. It's really difficult making a mixed build like this here in the game. There are so many options for how you could put this together, but my goal was to balance magic and melee as perfectly as possible, so neither would fall short. This build will never be as powerful as a focused build, but for a build spread between two primary stats, we wound up with an excellent result here. As well, thank you to everyone who voted for this build to be the first one we see from our set of 4 builds. We'll also be getting to each of the following builds in order of popularity. So if you voted for, say, the pure magic build or the carry weight build, those will be coming soon here. So maybe consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any of them along the way. But for now, let's get into today's build. First, let's go through the required resources here, as you might need to return to this section while coming up with the build. As always, all timestamps and resource costs will be in the description down below, so check them out if you need any specific section. We'll start off by gathering Titan's fingernail. You can get this in any swamp biome in any realm, but to group our resources effectively and save you folks hopping through a bunch of realms gathering stuff, we'll come to an ascended swamp antiquarian realm. What I like to do when hunting for Titan's fingernail is doing a quick loop around the map and pinning any Titan tree I see with my spyglass. This way I'll know if it's worthwhile to play a minor realm card, as you can spawn a swamp without any fingernail in it. So it's good to be safe and check first before investing a card and taking the time to either climb or clear a Fey tower. Once we have them marked down, we'll come to the tower, play a forge card, and then mine our fingernail at double the rate. When you need more, just reset the realm and use the Ascended Swamp Antiquarian as a burner realm for the other resources you can gather here. Which those will be Emerald for our umbrella, as well as Titanium for our climbing picks. Titanium comes as this silver gray ore. You can tell it out by its mining score of 200. Forge will come in benefit for gathering titanium, as it's not the most plentiful ore. It's not super rare, but its scant supply will be helped by doubling your rates and then boosting with Oberon's bounty. And then second last here in the swamp, we'll play a hunter card and go looking for Grendel Druids. Grendel Druids drop the best wood and thread for magic, so we'll be making as much use of their materials as possible here. And their drops are doubled by the Hunter Eminent card, so that'll be the fastest way to gather a lot of their mats. Just like all pack spawns in Nightingale, you have to wipe out the whole pack for them to respawn in the map. So when you look for druids, look for the 3 Grendel brutes that will show up on your spyglass. They'll usually be around each other, but can wander, so you might have to hunt around for them. Once you take out a pack, look for a new one. Each pack will have 1 druid, which you can tell out by them looking different to the other Grendels. And then the last resource we'll be gathering from the swamp here, Advanced Lacunus. We'll be hunting specifically for bound knights, as they drop lacunus and its advanced variant, as well as a really rare drop we'll talk about in a second here. But what you want to do is play a Blood Moon or Maleficate card to make it Infinite Knight. Blood Moon ups rare drop rates, but Maleficate Apogean doubles drops on top of the rare drop rates. So I tend to go with that one for faster farming, though I haven't done a side-by-side comparison of Blood Moon to Maleficate, so I'll need to do that soon. I actually plan on building a full-on advanced lacunus farm here in the game very soon, so stay tuned for a tutorial on that. But either way, we'll just walk around healing as we need to and taking out bound knights, hoping for advanced lacunus drops. But more importantly, really rare advanced lacunus blades. These would be what you could consider a fabled version of the advanced lacunus, as it has bonus critical damage on it. Rare fabled drops like this are not necessary, but like the Eoten wood in our last build, it'll be a benefit if you could get a bunch of it. Then we'll come to the forest, where we'll need to head to 2 realms to get the mats we need. First we'll come to a Ascended Forest Provisioner realm, and you can hunt carnutes in both of these realms to get your tier 3 carnute meat and hide. These guys are a tough fight, so make sure that you're adequately prepared. It's a shame the carnute weak point is kinda bugged at this moment, because it means we can't hunt them with the hunter card at play. So we'll just have to grind them out the old-fashioned way and kill like a dozen of them. Again, when skinning, always swing from away from the creature first so that you could skin them faster. It adds up over these long hunting trips. Then, while we're here in the Provisioner realm, we'll play a Hunter Eminent card and go hunting tier 3 beelzeboar. We'll need to take down about 10 to 12 of them for this outfit, and many, many more for the next one. So try to get as much of this guy as you can if you want to follow along with the builds. Meat is a real grind for making clothing here in Nightingale, but it's all kind of worth it if you think in real life your character would wind up looking like this. As well, in the forest, you can gather yourself Nice, which we'll be using as our stone powder. You don't need to play a quarry card, as you won't need much of this stuff, but to boost your rates a decent enough amount, you can use Oberon's Bounty if you'd like to. Then we'll need just a small amount of Nightingale. And lastly, tier 5 forest wood, which you can use Oberon's to boost your rates, and regrowth for an infinite supply of as much wood as you need. Then we'll need to come to an ascended forest to track down Camisots again. We won't be decimating his local population like we did for the last build, but we'll need to take down a few tier 3 Bandersnatch for this build still. Then we'll lastly need some desert resources, first being from desert vaults, the fabled sun giant ingots which you get for completing the vault. I find it's best to run public vaults for this, as you can get other people to help with clearing challenges along the way. Then we'll wipe out the sun giant and collect our ingots. We'll need a lot of this stuff for today's build and our final magic build, so you'll want a healthy supply of sun giant ingots. Then we'll come to an Ascended Desert Gloom realm to hunt down Seer Eotens. These guys will spawn in multiple desert realms, but I find Gloom to be a really good source of these guys. After defeating one, you only need to walk like 20 feet usually to find another. We won't need a crazy amount of Seer Eoten wood today, as we're just using it for our climbing picks, but still it's good to hunt for, as we might need more in the future. And then a rare resource from the desert, much like Titan's Fingernail or Anidia, Star Ruby will spawn in pretty much all desert realms, so you don't need a specific realm for this one, just the biome. There's no way to boost drops from Star Ruby, so you'll only get 8 at a time. Luckily, we just need a few, but it's good to always be on the lookout for these gem-encrusted trees when you're in a desert. So first, to maximize our ingot production, we'll play the industry card while crafting to double our rates. This is extremely beneficial for Titan's Fingernail, as we'll be using a lot of it today. Let's start from the top and work our way down. First with the Calcularian Hat. We'll make our leather out of tier 3 carnute hide. Then we'll make our cloth from Grendel Druid thread. Then we'll stitch that together with even more Grendel Druid thread for a very good magic hat that has extra stamina regen. Then for our Druidic Jacket, we'll be using tier 3 carnute for the leather. This is where you'll need to farm a lot of carnutes here. Not so much for the leather, but more for the refined fiber for the lining. I wish we could use Druid thread for this, but sadly you can't unrefine the thread into fiber to use for lining. Still, we'll make the most of what we can and just hunt carnutes for a good hour or so. Just for this jacket, you'll need 72 carnute meat alone, which is like 13 or so carnutes. Then for our ornament, we'll use advanced lacunus. And for our buckles, we'll make our plates out of Titan's fingernail, so we could get magic and a bit of crit on the build. We'll be opting for more Titan's fingernail than Sun Giant to get that crit bonus, as it will help us stack our damage. Then we'll put that all together for a pretty solid mixed jacket, blending both melee and magic. Now for our backpack. We're going with the Explorer's Pack for the speed bonus, and so we'll be using tier 3 Bandersnatch to make our straps and our leather to stack a bit more speed, as well as Titan's Fingernail again for some magic and some crit, ending up with a solid Explorer's Pack built for both speed and magic. Now for our Druidic Casual shirt. We're going to be building this for pure melee, making fiber out of tier 3 beelzeboar. We'll turn some of that into thread so we can make cloth with it, and again, this will be pretty pricey on the meat, but we'll also make our refined fiber to make fabric for our lining, and then we'll use Grendel Druid thread to stitch that together. Then we'll make our ornament and 4 buttons out of advanced lacunus. Putting that all together for a really mean shirt that still has a small buff to our magic, so it's not 100% melee, but more like 95%. Now for our Hermetics Breeches, which again will be designed for melee. This is why you needed quite a bit of beelzeboar meat for these 2 items. You'll make your cloth from beelzeboar fiber, then your leather from beelzeboar hide, then your ornaments and buckles from advanced lacunus. Putting them all together this time for an actual pure melee build, offering a wild 90% melee damage buff. Then for our gloves, this is where we yet again make a huge dump of beelzeboar meat to get some solid gloves out of it. But as these are also mixed gloves, we'll start with tier 3 carnute for our leather, then make our refined fiber for our fabric out of beelzeboar that we'll use for the melee buff. We're yet again opting for Calcularian clothing, not entirely just for variety between our builds, but also for the stamina regen buff that comes in handy when in combat and out exploring. But in the end, we get a great spread of stats on these gloves. And lastly for our clothes, our boots, which we will make yet again from Bandersnatch. We'll use hides for our leather as well as straps. Then for our buttons, we'll again opt for Titan's fingernail for that crit damage, making our speedy but still with a bit of magic focused boots. And this is what our build looks like as an end result. A suave blend of colors you might not expect to work together. Orange, black, purple, tan, and gray. That comes out not looking like a clown, but more as a refined gentleman or lady. Now, sadly, we'll address the elephant in the room. There are some clothing items we're stuck with here currently in Nightingale, as they give the best stats. That being the jacket, the shirt, and the pants. We have free choice of our gloves and everything else, but because those 3 items have 4 material slots, they are just vastly better than any of the alternatives. Hopefully someday we'll have more 4-slot clothing to choose from for our endgame builds, but for now we're kinda stuck with those 3 as permanent pieces of attire. Now for our weapons. As this is a combat-based build, we won't be making any tools for this one, just magic and melee weapons, excluding the climbing picks, but they still wind up as great weapons here. We'll start by making a grip for our knife out of beelzeboar, then some leather out of carnute hide, and then we'll make our gilded blade out of advanced lacunus, gilded with Titan's fingernail. This is one of those fabled advanced lacunus blades I was talking about earlier, so it has a bonus 5% crit buff on it. And then lastly, we'll make our shaft for our guard out of Titan's fingernail. And we wind up with a really sick knife here. Great crit bonus, solid damage, and still a good amount of magic. This won't be your primary caster, but when using it, magic will be a great option alongside melee combat. And the knife looks dang good too, with the advanced lacunus rose gold, then having the gilded edge. It looks very unique, which is fitting for a magic melee knife. Now for our axe, which might be my favorite weapon out of the set. We'll start by making a cut gem out of nice and star ruby. Then we'll make gilded lumber out of druid's wood and Titan's fingernail that will turn to carved wood and into a hilt for the axe. Then we'll make a forged handle out of sun giant for both the shaft and the ornament. Then we'll make our wire for our filigree out of more sun giant. And then metal plates for the blade out of Titan's fingernail. Then we'll make an axe head out of the blade and a sun giant ingot, whip up our filigree, then put that together to make an artisanal axe head. And with that all combined, we wind up with an axe that has a great amount of magic, solid crit, and will balance out its lesser melee damage with our outfit. But really, it's the looks that get me with this one. Sun Giant is this awesome gold color, and when you have a pure gold axe with the shifting colors of the Star Ruby, it's just a real nice looking weapon. Now for our pickaxe. We're making this a pure melee pickaxe for when you just want to hit something really hard. Because, surprisingly, the pickaxe is actually the best option for a melee weapon, as even though the maul has more damage, the pickaxe's damage type being piercing is effective against more enemies, so it's a better overall weapon, though the maul still has its uses. Either way, we'll start with a wrap made from tier 3 beelzeboar. Then we'll gild tier 5 forest wood with advanced lacunus, make carved wood out of that, and turn it into a hilt. Then we'll make more gilded lumber and use that to make a pole. Then we'll make our fasteners out of advanced lacunus, and combine them with the pole to make a handle. Then we'll make our pick head out of advanced lacunus for both the ingot and the metal tip, and turn it into a hardened pick head with bronze as our alloy. Then we'll put that all together for an absolutely disgusting pick build that will be further benefited by not just our melee clothes, but how we use it in combination with our magic too. And this is the end result, again with the darker rose goldish color of the lacunus, and then the bright wood from the forest wood. An overall really nice looking, but more importantly powerful pickaxe build. And now for our heavy magic hitter, our Mystic Sickle. We'll be using this as an elemental boomerang, and we'll be supercharging it with a few tricks. But first, for the Sickle build itself, we'll start by making another cut gem out of Star Ruby and Nice. Then we'll make metal plates for our blade out of Sun Giant, and we'll combine that with Titan's fingernail to make our gilded blade. Then we'll prep up some fasteners made out of Titan's fingernail and make wires out of fingernail as well. After that, we'll gild our druid lumber with Titan's fingernail and then turn that into a pole, which we'll combine with our fasteners for a handle. And lastly, we'll make our filigree out of those wires that we made earlier. Then we'll make a sickle that has really solid magic at 230 and good crit for a sickle. It's lower than our axe by a bit in terms of raw magic, but when combined with our lantern, we'll be able to push that magic score to the highest on our build. And the thing, pardon the pun, looks sick, man! Combining the pink with the gold makes for a really awesome looking sickle that is even cooler when on fire. It's again a bit unique in its style, but that fits the magic build we're going for, I think. And now for our climbing picks, built to be efficient with speed and stamina and still be good enough for a fight. So we'll be building these out of some select materials here. First, we'll make our grip out of tier 3 Bandersnatch for the straps, wrap, and hide. Then we'll make an ornament out of Anidia. We'll then make our pickheads out of titanium for the metal tips and ingots. Then we'll make our hardened pickheads with bronze. Then we'll use the Seer Eoten wood for the speed boost and gild that with more Anidia. Turn that gilded wood into a pole and combine that with some fasteners made from Anidia, and our last weapon is complete, though this one's more of a tool than a dedicated weapon. With the great movement speed buff of 6% as well as recovering 4 stamina per second, you can use this to get around quickly and efficiently. These look alright too. I like the look of titanium, though I would prefer another metal than Anidia, but sadly it's the only metal with movement speed, so we'll work with what we've got. Now for our lantern. We're building a Dauntless Lantern as we'll be taking advantage of its base crit rate to keep that melee focus in mind with our tools as well as our weapons. We'll start by making molded glass out of Star Ruby, then Titan's fingernail for our wire. Then we'll make a pole out of gilded druid lumber with Titan's fingernail and combine that with fasteners made from more fingernail to make a handle. Then lastly, we'll make a grip from tier 3 carnute for the straps, wrap, and hide. And we'll combine that all together for a lantern that isn't focused so much on healing us, and more for buffing our magic and crit damage, helping our balanced build no matter what approach we're using. And I'd say it's alright looking. A lot more silver than I expected, but still, looks aside, this thing has the perfect stats for our build. So for our second last item of the day, our Mystic Glider. This will be built to balance speed and magic so we can get a good boost for combat, but also move slightly more efficiently. And most importantly, set up the glider with the Charm of the Wind to glide around with ease. We'll start by making our cloth out of tier 3 Bandersnatch meat. Then our wire, shaft, and ornament out of Fabled Sun Giant. Then we'll make a cut gem with nice and emerald, and slap that all together for a speedy, magical umbrella. And I think this one looks really good. Gold and emerald is one of my favorite combinations, so I'm happy to finally find a build to work it into here. And even though we lack the overall movement speed to really fly around with this, it still serves as a functional boost to both our speed and magic at the same time. Lastly here, our throwing knife, which will be made from druid lumber, gilded with Titan's fingernail. And then we'll use Sun Giant as the ingot. And I hate to admit it, but this is purely for activating pylons. It's a bit of a goofy little weapon to mess around with, but a basically zero range damage throwing knife is as bad as it sounds. It does give us a small bit of a magic boost being made from Sun Giant, but it really doesn't compare to our lantern, which is our main combat tool. Still though, I think the combination of the gold and red looks really good. I got used to the purple knife, but this gold one looks very nice. And the utility of having something to activate pylons from a distance on a build that doesn't use any guns is very much worth the toolbar slot. And then we'll go through the process of upgrading everything to tier 3 and adding our charms and enchantments. Again, all of this will be listed in the description below, but last time it was too long for the description and likely will be this time too. So be sure to check the pinned comment below too for the final costs. As well, a reminder that all of the stuff you need for charms and enchants can be bought from your abeyance trader. For our final stats, we have some real good overall stats on our build. At 1400 health, we are a little fragile, but we can make up for that with healing, food buffs, and Arborist Shield. Our stamina is solid at 165, our melee is really good at 259 damage from a single punch, and our magic is great at 1386, though when we make a pure magic build, it'll dwarf that. Still, for our balanced melee magic build, a base score of over 1000 is a real good final score. As well, an almost 2 times crit buff without any weapons, which will be great when paired with our Lantern and Dauntless Knife. We have a few setups here in our loadout. First with our Dauntless Pickaxe, bringing our movement speed up to 24%, and again, doing pretty solid damage for a utility weapon. Then our Lantern and Sickle combo, pushing our magic up to 3000, where we can use our Shockwave and Flame magic with deadly effect. Our Dauntless Pick, which just has wild melee damage. Again, our melee-focused build will dwarf this one, but for an all-rounder, 84k is great, alongside the enchantments we'll use, which we'll get into in a second here. Then our Axe, the true hybrid weapon, with great magic and reliable melee damage. And lastly, our Knife, with almost 11 times crit and 11,000 damage. It's a crazy knife when paired with combat enchantments. Then for our final segment of the build, our Charms and Enchantments, which are very important being a magic-based build. There's a lot to choose from, and during my testing of making this build, charms and their layout were something I tested quite a bit. There are some charms that just don't work on tools, and so finding those out was a process. But the plain and simple is that any magic-based buff won't work on a tool, either just due to it not working quite right yet, or because you put away your offhand tool when you cast a spell. Either way, it played a lot into optimizing this build. First off, for our hat, a bread and butter charm we'll have on pretty much every build, the Charm of Patience. This gives a really good damage buff when you don't cause or take any damage for a short period, and when stacked with crits and other buffs, it becomes a really crazy amount of damage. Then the Charm of Brutality, which will give us a boost to damage on downed enemies, which will happen a lot from Quake. Then the Charm of Spellsword, which literally our build is like a battle mage, where we'll be using melee almost evenly with our magic, so this will boost our melee with every enchantment we cast. Then the Charm of Mercy, another essential charm we'll be using on all of our combat-based builds. This allows for what I call mercy kills, which is the game just giving you an insane damage buff when an enemy is weakened, which can come in handy for the tougher fights. Then on our pants, the Charm of Blood. This one's a tough call, and if you don't like it, definitely don't use it, but it essentially makes you take a chunk of damage every time you cast a spell, but gives you a buff to your magic damage and efficiency, which can come in handy for keeping this build efficient on all bases. But I'm not gonna lie, I've died to this one just once since I put together the build, so it is a risk to take on the build, but it seems to add almost an extra 500 magic, hypothetically, when casting spells. For our gloves, we'll have the Charm of the Arcane, which boosts our movement speed when casting an enchantment. And then on our boots, we'll have the Charm of Momentum, which, when combined with the Charm of the Arcane, gives us a free increase to our momentum damage buff. Then on our Lantern, the Charm of the Unstoppable, as this is our main magic boost, we'll be using it quite a bit in combat, and the Charm of the Unstoppable gives a defense buff when you kill multiple enemies, which you'll do quite a bit with magic. Then Charm of the Wind on our glider for more speed, can never go wrong with more speed. And lastly for our charms, the Charm of Blindside on our throwing knives, as we can pair them with our hunting knife to sneak up on enemies and get a good damage buff on an early crit with the knife's backstab. Then for our enchantments, with our Dauntless Knife, I had this thought process that the Mystic Sickle is a great ranged and close range weapon, so let's make our knife be the same with Quake and then summon Swarm for 2 ranged options. One offering great stagger, and the other offering rapid chip damage. Then our Mystic Axe with Arborist Shield for a huge defense buff, Quake, and then Shockwave to mix things up with close and ranged combat. And for our mining pick, we have Ring of Empowerment to buff our melee damage while we're in the ring, up to absurd degrees of damage, then Shockwave and Hermetic Flame for close ranged magic. On our Sickle, the good old Shockwave and Hermetic Flame, which again, when paired with our Lantern, will be one of our strongest forms of attack. And last but not least, our climbing picks, which have our utility spells of Track Legend, Dispel, and Assassin's Sight. This build gives you an insane amount of options, a real Swiss Army knife of a build, with ranged combat in the form of magic and throwing sickle, the lantern to buff yourself, the mystic axe for a middle ground weapon, and the pick for a pure melee weapon, the umbrella glider to move freely, and the climbing picks to move quickly. You can essentially do it all with this build. This was a massive undertaking with so much testing. I actually came up with 2 builds in the process of making this video, so stay tuned for our next vote where you can decide on what we'll be doing next for our builds here in Nightingale. But thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the build. I really tried to think of everything I could with this one. But for now, I will catch you all in the next one. Until then, peace.